I'd like to invite and introduce Father Majeski to fire us and for this week's Minatzchim meeting.
Okay, we'll start.
Yeah.
So I want to start by saying that Hashgacha Prat is this meeting is taking place in the week of Parshas Tazria, and Tazria Metzera Tavshin Aleph. That's the historic Shabbos and the historic Sicha. Well, the Rebbe spoke about the Derech HaYeshara, how to bring Mashiach. This was after Chavches Nissen, when the Rebbe said the Sicha of Tut Alt was erkent. And then there was a lot of commotions. What does the Rebbe want and what do we need to do? And a little bit over a week later, it was Vavir. Sabbath that year, Tazria Metzera was together. But of course, it was an Ear time. But that was the Shabbos that the Rebbe said and put down this new inyan of how you bring Mashiach, the Derech HaYeshara, is through learning Inyanim Mashiach Gula. And B'chlal, that Fabrengen, there were a lot of Inyanim Nefloim, Mamish, unbelievable things, unprecedented things that happened by the Fabrengen. And we'll go over some of them. First of all, this in itself, that the Derech HaYeshara to bring Mashiach is through learning Inyanim Mashiach Gula, was the big chiddush. Because up until that time, the Rebbe always spoke about what we can do to be Mezaras the Geula. And generally speaking, there were three things that the Rebbe always emphasized. One is Afatza Meyonas Chutza. The second thing is Tzedakah, Gdei Tzedakah Shemakareves Zagula. And the third thing was Avos Yisrael, that the whole union of Golus came as a result of Sinas Chinam. So therefore, how could you be Mevatel? The Golus is by doing the opposite, Avos Chinam. And in a certain sense, all the Meftzayim were based on that. But these were the main three things. And here, the Rebbe introduced something new, that through learning Torah in Yoni, Mashiach Gula, that alone is Mezaras the Geula. And what's the Hasbara? How is that? On the surface, it appeared that the Hasbara was, just like it says, Kala Eisig B'Teres Eila, Ki'ilu Hikrav Eila, that when you learn Torah in a certain subject, you bring that and you make that happen. Or similar to what the Rebbe says about Hilchos Beis Abchira, the famous Medrash, that if you learn the halachas of Binyan Beis Hamikdash, is that's Ein Beisi Batel, that causes that the Beis Hamikdash should not be Batel. It's actually being built. Of course, it means it's being built Beruchnius, which makes it more likely to become being built Begashmius. And then especially at Chassidus, it's known that this is all the Maimarim, or many Maimarim, on Lag B'Omer, talk about the story with Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, that Zimna, Alma, Tzrichel, and Mitra, there was a time that the world had no rain. And instead of the normal Eifen, which is through Tefillah, and especially someone like Chini Amagel, which had a special way of Tefillah, and then there's Tanesim and all sorts of Tefillahs in the street, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai had a different way. He said, Torah on the pasuk, Hine matevim anoim sheves achem gam yachad. He explained the inyan of rain the way it is l'mayla, the inyan of yichud zah malchus. And after he finished explaining what it is and said the Torah on that pasuk, then it started to rain begashmis. So that's the nekuda that comes out of this sikha, that through learning Yana Mashiach Gula, it's like his Gula makes it happen. Later, a few months later, in Parshas Balak, the Rebbe added that there's more to it. It's not just the inyan of his Gula, but the Rebbe said that there are people that, in spite of the fact that there's such amazing things happening, Shnas, Niflois, Arena, there are amazing things that are happening, and the world is going through miracles, and yet there are still people that are having a hard time, and it's just not registering in their minds that this is the union of Gula. So therefore, the Rebbe says, what's the Eitzah? What could you do if a person has that difficulty? And the answer was, when you learn Torah in Yonim Mashiach Gula, Torah has the Keich, and Torah is Hecha from Belt. And Torah has the Keich to be Meshana, the Tev of a person. So even though it's at his personal hergish, he doesn't get it, it doesn't register. But if he'll learn in Yonim Mashiach Gula, he'll become a transformed person. This will lift him into the world of Gula, and he'll become a Guladik person, will start living Guladik, and that, of course, hastens the coming of Mashiach. One of the things that are pointed out about that famous Sikha, when the Rebbe spoke about learning in Yonim Mashiach Gula, the Rebbe specifically said to learn in Teresh B'Ksav and Teresh B'Peh, and then the Rebbe writes, the Rebbe said, B'Frat, B'Teirosei, which the Maimorim and the Likuti Sichas of Nasi Dareinu. And not only the Rebbe said it, but this was later came out in print, and the Rebbe was Magia the Sicha, to come out into the newspapers and Kvar Chabad magazine. Likuti Sichas of Nasi Dareinu. And we know that that's the Rebbe, because all the other Svarim are not called Likuti Sichas. So the Rebbe is clearly telling us to learn B'chlal, and to learn specifically the Kuti Sichas, and you should refer to it as Sidareinu. This is something unprecedented. In fact, one could say, okay, we got to learn the Rebbe Sichas, but there are a lot of Sichas on Mashiach Gula. Why dafke the Sichas of Nunalef Nun Beis? And the answer is very pashut. That being that we're talking about what's going on now, the Rebbe wants us to understand, to feel, to live Mashiach, and to look at the events that are happening in the world and realize that we're in that kufa. So the way to know what's going on now is by learning the sichas, where the Rebbe talks about what's going on now. I remember once I was approached by someone, an older chassid that I knew him, and he said to me, I just saw yesterday something really weird. What did he see? He says he was by the oil, and somebody was standing by the oil and said, so he said, no, so what's so weird? So you didn't hear what I'm telling you. He's by the oil and he's saying Yechi. So he said, well, that's what it says in the Sikh of Beis Nissen. It's hanging on all the walls in 770. The Rebbe says that when you say Yechi HaMelech, it causes Hikitzu V'ranu Malka Mashiach. Hikitzu V'ranu Sheikh Ni'ofra, the Frierdiker Rebbe, and Hikitzu V'ranu Malka Mashiach. So he thinks a little bit and then he says, yeah, but what do you have to learn these sikhas? There are many sikhas. Why do you have to dafka kochzech in this sikha? And the answer is because this is the sikha that talks about this subject. So of course, to know and understand what's going on now is by learning the sikhas of Tafshin Nun Aleph, not Chof Aleph, and not Lamed Aleph, and not any other year. Another thing which is an incredible thing in this sikha, which is probably also unprecedented, that the sikha begins, the sikha of Sazria, when it came out in print, begins with the Rebbe saying that we're living in a time now that we just had, these are the Rebbe's words, Shebiyumeinu Eila Mamish, with the end of Chedesh Nissen, Kolu Kolakitzin Kipshute Mamish, that we just witnessed and we just experienced the Kates, but Kipshute Mamish. And in the Haris, you see the Rebbe is referring to Chav Ches Nissen. In other words, the Rebbe is saying that what happened on Chav Ches Nissen wasn't only potential, but there was a certain case, a certain aspect of Golus that came to an end. Kipshuti Mamish. That's what the Rebbe said. This is also the Sikha where the Rebbe brings the Gemara in Sanhedrin, that there were Talmidim that said, each one said that their Rebbe is Mashiach. And in that ha'ara, where the Rebbe brings it in the Sikha, again, what does the Rebbe say? The Rebbe says something which we never saw this al Zachar that Chassidim spoke about amongst themselves. But here, in the Sikha, the Rebbe says that each one said about their Rebbe that he's Mashiach. And then the Rebbe says, Vanan Chassidim Nane Abasrayo, which means we Chassidim should follow their example, which basically It's not just the pshat. This is the hero. The Rebbe is saying is we Chassidim should follow their example and say the same. But negay that Rebbe is saying when Nesiyenu. Then the Rebbe right away says how this applies to the Frierdiker Rebbe. And another thing the Rebbe says that from Rashi we see that it's not that the Talmidim are the ones who sort of initiated this idea. Because it says, Kol echad ha'yeder shachar shmoi, that the Rebbe himself of that generation said on himself that he is Mashiach. And the Talmidim went on and they elaborate on it. So these are all made in the Kinyanim. Each one is with more things that I'm not mentioning here, that in that Sikha, where the Rebbe spoke so openly about Mashiach, about the time that we're in. That's besides what happened actually by the Farbrengen. That was the Farbrengen that Nachshon gave Mashka, and the Mashka was, and he announced it that it's to celebrate the Haftarah of the Rebbe as Mashiach. And everyone saw, we were all standing there, we saw the Rebbe was going on answering people l'chaim, acting as if there was nothing unusual with what he said. Of course, there are some people that argue, but the Rebbe didn't show that he approved it. The Rebbe didn't show that he didn't disapprove it, which that itself is the greatest approval. There's a sikha from the Rebbe, Parsha Shoftim, Nun Aleph, where the Rebbe talks about the idea that today there is nevuah, even today in the time of Golus. And the Rebbe says some people want to bring a raya from Tanya otherwise, because the Alter Rebbe in Simon Chov Beis, the Geras HaKodesh, tells the Chassidim not to come to him with their questions about Gashmias. And the reason is because what Gashmias, that's for a Navi Mamish. And therefore they shouldn't come to the Alter Rebbe. So isn't that proof that the Alter Rebbe is saying that he's not a Navi? So the Rebbe answers, Adar Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe said it's for Navi Mamish, don't come to me. However, the Chassidim didn't stop. They continued coming to the Alter Rebbe and all the Rebbeim, asked them questions about Gashmias, and the Alter Rebbe answered them. After saying that it's only for a Navi, that means the Alter Rebbe is confirming that he is a Navi, and what he's saying is really an inyan of Nevuah. Dafka, the Rebbe was shayl before with such strong way not to go out and publicize that the Rebbe is Mashiach. We all know that, but that was at an earlier time. So then later, when someone's standing in front of the Rebbe and makes such a hachrazah, and the Rebbe acts as if there's nothing going on, nothing out of the ordinary, and there's nothing that the Rebbe says otherwise, it's Adar Rebbe Pumfaker. Here the Rebbe is, that's exactly like the story with the Alter Rebbe, that the Rebbe is confirming what this person is saying. And this whole happened in front of everyone's eyes. So this is the week that should give us a lot of chayis. At that time, whoever was there was zeicha to be there in 770 at that time, knows that it was a zman like we never ever had before. Pashat people, I only then understood the expression that they have when they write stories that he was walking on a cloud. It's like we weren't walking on the floor. Everybody was so lifted. First was the war that was taking Giz Mangolaskim. Then Purim was the end of the war. And then came the sichas from the Rebbe about the letters the Rebbe gave out for Pesach about how this war could have been Rahman Islam. There were Nisim even greater than Purim. And then there was the Sikha in Shmini, which Rebbe spoke again about the war. And then came Chavches Nissen, and then Shabbos Zriya Mitzayra. And these Asius, the Elam was going out of the Kalim. And what happened by the Farbrengen when they made the Sachroza. Nevertheless, we're in a different Zman right now. And one of the things that I think we hear, at least I hear, everybody hears, is a Molech is always there to ask questions and to try to upkill him. That what do we do with the Sikha Mishpatim? The Sikha Mishpatim, the Rebbe spoke clearly that we're living in a new Tkufa, and that this is part of the Neflois Arena, that we're seeing the world is going to of peace and Zevaita, and now we're finding ourselves in a matzah which we're seeing in this time. So first of all, that's what Amunah is. It doesn't matter what you see, doesn't matter what you hear. When the Rebbe says something, we know that Dvar Elikim, and Elikenu is Yokum and Saloilam, and there's nothing in the world that I hear or see that's going to challenge or weaken in any way the words that I hear from the Rebbe himself. But just as a precedent to this, we know by the Alter Rebbe, where the Alter Rebbe did everything that the Tsar should win the war and France should lose the war, the Napoleon. And we know that part of the story is that initially it looked like the opposite was happening, that Napoleon was coming into Russia and the Russians were running away. And it says that everyone came running to the Alter Rebbe, including the Mittler Rebbe, and they were crying. The Alter Rebbe was wearing 1,000 tefillin. The Alter Rebbe made a shvuah. He made a shvuah that he swears that this is what's going to be, Sof Kol Sof, he will be defeated. So we see that even though the Alter Rebbe said that, L'chatchila looked one way, and then it turned out to be the other way. But the Nekuda is something which is interesting. Negate to last week's Parsha Shmini. There's a medrash in Parsha Shmini that says, there's a pasuk in Eishes Chayil where it says, "Vatischak liyem achrim." What does it mean? So a lot of pirushim in this pasuk. In that medrash it says that there was a tzani hador, that when Moshe Rabbeinu said that we're going to build a mishkan and the Shekhinah is going to come down, the Litzani Hadar made Litzanis and said it's never going to happen. And it's interesting. This is already after Eser Makis, after Yitzias Mitzrayim, after Kriyas Yamsuf, after Melchemes Amalek, after Matan Torah. And there's still Litzani Hadar that is saying it's never going to happen. And then Moshe Rabbeinu had them build everything. But even though it was built, he didn't let them set it up. They had to wait. And even after they set it up a few months later, we know that at night they took it down. And every single day they built it and they took it down. So the Litzan Hadar kept making Litzanas and saying, you see, it's never going to happen. The Peo, the last day, Hashmini, they built the Mishkan, and then they saw that Meishamis and Terasamis. So we see that there are things that are happening. It looks like it's being taken apart. Then it looks like it's coming back together again. Then it looks like it's being taken apart. And Sof Kol Sof, whatever Moshe Rabbeinu says is Kein Yokum. That's the way it is. And in a certain way, if you look at what's happening today, there's actually another Nekuda which can be brought out. And that is that, when the Rebbe spoke about the changes taking place in Russia, that this is part of the Neflois Arena, that Yidden were in Russia for 70 years, persecuted, no Torah, no mitzvahs, and Rahman al-Islam, the consequences for learning Torah mitzvahs. And now the whole matzav changed and it's total freedom. So they raise questions, it's different times, different this. Where do you see that it's Mashiach, Neflois Arena? But the truth is, when you see what they're doing now, the way this person is acting, and you see that everything that was in the Soviet Union in the times of Stalin and all those, it's all well and alive now. The same people doing the same thing, killing hundreds and thousands, tens of thousands of people, and doing everything the way they used to do it. No difference. It hasn't changed. And yet at the same time, the same person is giving all the freedom to Torah mitzvahs. The same person is giving honor to the shluchim of the Rebbe, coming out and honoring a menorah or a museum that was built or anything else that was done. This shows us even more clearly how everything that we saw happening until now is Neflois Arena. It wasn't something which is al pi derech hateva. It wasn't something which is such a pashut thing. And to conclude with something that's negeya also to Chedesh Nisan, there's a lesson that the Rebbe brings a lot in the Sichas, but the Rebbe didn't bring the whole medrash. And a few years ago, someone showed me the medrash, and I thought it was really also incredible to see. It's a medrash which is called Psikta de Rav Kana, and the medrash goes on the pasuk Hine Zeh Bo, and the medrash said that it's referring to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he said, "Kol Dei Hine Zeh Bo." It was Reish Chodesh Nisan. And Moshe Rabbeinu told Yidden, "B'chedesh hazeh atem nigolim." This month you're going out of Golus. So there's three opinions. One opinion is that the Yidden tiny to Moshe, it basically the Medrash is explaining the Lashon, Medalig al Harim, Mekapetz al Gvois. What does it mean the Eibusher jumps over the mountains and skips over the hills? That they tiny, how could we go out of Golus? We're supposed to be in Golus 400 years and it's only 210. And Moshe Rabbeinu said to them, but the Eibusher wants to take you out of Golus. He's going to jump over all the calculations, jump over all the cheshbonos, and he'll take you out earlier. And that's what it means. Then there's another opinion that the Yidden argued with Moshe and they said, how could the Eibusher take us out of Golus? Mitzrayim is filled with the Avodah Zarah of Yidden. So they don't deserve to be taken out of Golus. And again, Moshe Rabbeinu said, the Eibusher wants to take you out of Golus. And the Eibusher takes you out. And then there's a third group that said, how can we go out of Golus? We don't have any Maisim Tevim. And again, the Eibusher said, I'm not looking at that. I just look at the tzaddikim. And in that schus, you will go out of Golus. And then the Medrash says that the same will happen with Mashiach. When Mashiach is going to come and tell the Yidden, the Yidden are going to say, these are the words, Rabbeinu Melech HaMashiach. They're going to say, Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach. How could we go out of Golus? Yidden is supposed to be in Golus by Shivim Umis. We haven't yet been by all Shivim Umis. Imagine, they're arguing. And what does the Medrash say? It gives two answers. One answer is, Echad Mikem Geilu the Barbaria, Echad Mikem Geilu the Sarmatia. When one Yid goes to the end of the world, it's as if all the Yidden are there. And B'meila, it's as if all of us, being that there's Yidden all over the world, it's as if all of us were in the Shivim Umis. And the other answer is that there's a Ummah that's going to make a certain Gzeira, and it's going to be backed by all the other Ummas. So it's again as if we're in Golus by all Shivim Umis. So we see, Pashat, that it could be such as man, that Yidden are going to argue, and Yidden are going to find all sorts of Toradic explanations why it can happen. And Melech HaMashiach will have to push and encourage, and you have to have Munah, even if people bring all sorts of svaras and all sorts of things. Our Aveda is where the Rebbe's soldiers, Chayil Melech. Our Aveda is, like it says in the Sikh of Chayil Beis David, to be Mefarsem, the Munah Mashiach in the whole world. And basically, if we accept the Rebbe's Malchus, we accept the Rebbe's Malchus, we meaning we who are talking now, and all the Babich Chassidim, ultimately it'll be in the whole world. One of the Taichen in Chassidus on the Pasuk, Baruch, on the Lashon, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, is that if Hashem is Elokeinu, if we Makabel the Eibishter as Elokeinu, is B'meila Melech HaOlam, who become the Melech over the whole world. So if we are Makabel the Malchus of the Rebbe upon ourselves, and we accept the Rebbe's Malchus as Melech HaMashiach, then ultimately the whole world will accept it. The whole world meaning the whole Yiddish world, and even Umas Eilam will observe the Shem Mitzvah Neach, but it's through accepting the authority of Melech HaMashiach. So if we accept it by us, then it'll be automatically, it'll have ashpah that the whole world will accept it by them. And there's actually a sikha I once saw where the Rebbe said that if someone is Isaac in Yom Mashiach Agula, but not in Gans in the way they could, bedakus, it's like cher fuikvas mishichecha. So it's a very strong lashon, how much we all have in achrayus, each one to do whatever we can. And at this point, the inyan of Mashiach is mufursim. The whole world is talking about Mashiach. It's coming out of everywhere, all different circles. So midwasism, we can believe in that now people, they believe in Geula, they believe in the inyan of Geula, and they believe that it's happening now. And now we have to see that people should be mekabel the inyan of Malchus and Melech HaMashiach. This is really what the Rebbe said in the beginning, Mishpatim Tavshin and Aleph. The Rebbe said that year was Kapitel Peites, and the Rebbe said that we have already the inyan of Mashiach we already have, like it says in the pasuk that the Mashiach of David HaMelech took place. All we need now is the Kabbalah HaMalchus Adei. So we have to strengthen ourselves, and every little thing we do in this is we have no idea that it has an effect on the whole world. And what we have to do is to mechazik ourselves, all those around us, and of course everybody with the ideas that you have, practical ideas, to be mefarsim kabbalah samalchus of the Rebbe als Melech HaMashiach, and mezeicha zayin that we'll see this galus be'enei basar, and it should be taken from Yad Mamish.
Amen. Amen. Okay. Thank you very, very much. If anyone has any questions or
Yeah.
Just somehow, I think the positive things that we see now, what's happening with Ukraine, is that we're seeing the Indian that the Rebbe spoke about. I think this was also 30 years ago, the Indian of Yisrael, the Indian of Kibbutz Goliath, that the Yidden in Russia are able to be Mekayim mitzvahs more freely. We're seeing now many Yidden that are coming out of Russia, Mekayim mitzvahs, doing bris milas and all the other things coming to Eretz Yisrael. There is an Indian that they're coming to. There's an Indian of coming to Eretz Yisrael. Now, many people are getting lost with the fog. They're getting blurred with the fog. It's happening. But there are many, many positive things that we can learn.
Right. I mean, that's what the Rebbe taught us in the Sichos. There's so much going on, but the Rebbe taught us to focus on the prat, which is a chiyuv prat, and to see that this is where you see this galus of Mashiach.
Not only that, they're saying now that they're losing. Basically, that Ukraine is basically pushing them out. Like a superpower. Isn't a superpower should be pushed out like that? It's not a miracle. I mean, you have to start talking about the miracles here. I mean, it's not over yet, but there are miracles happening almost every day.
Right. I mean, in a sense, it's just like the Rebbe says about Simcha B'chlal, that there are different things that happen in a person's life. And we have a choice either to focus on the negative and then a person's not B'simcha, or to focus on the positive, and he'll see has so much to be B'simcha. So, like you said, we get lost in the fog. There's so many things that are happening which are Mashiach if we look at it, and then we just know that what the Rebbe said is, Chai V'Kayam, and that's where it's going to be. Then we have to look at certain Nekudas and bring that out and emphasize that and elaborate on that people should see where we're seeing that there's a Mashiach the Kinyan that are happening.
okay.
No, it's still though.
Rabbi Majeski, you were mentioning the Medrash that Melech HaMashiach answers the Tvei Zachen, Echad Goyle LeBarbavia, Echad Goyle this. And the second one is that there's one Ummah that's, people were made already, and I saw Beryl Levov talks about it in his Sefer, that Loheya, that's the Sicha Parshas Vayeshev. The Rebbe starts the Sicha of mention of Tinus. People are asking. The people are asking, and we're saying that Mashiach is here. Wie sieht man das? And the Rebbe answers the two answers. The Rebbe says, "Koidem kol Yidden sind angekommen of the ganze Welt." They stopped being used to be. They were concentrated around Eretz Yisrael in the Middle East, and then they were more and more and more. And at kedei kach that some Yidden went all over the world. The second answer, the Rebbe speaks about France. How France is Tachlis Abirudim and Tzav Tzarfas. So it seems like those two answers that are given in that Medrash that Melech HaMashiach tells the people when they ask him, one Medina that's representing all Medinas. So, and the Rebbe makes like a ched that Tzarfas is 770, Shivim Umayis, where each one is, and how much Tzarfas had an impact. No, because the modern world is very much geboite so much on Tzarfas the Gein Yanim. So the bitter in Tzarfas should not bitter finale.
Also, you can say B'Pashtus, what's happening? United Nations comes out with they condemn Eretz Yisrael, or they say it's us to give back land. It's basically There never was such a platform that all Shiva movements are together, and here they're all together coming out against Eretz Yisrael. So the Peo, it's Taka Ala Shiva movements. But Echad Mekem Geile Barbaria Vechlis Ramacha, the Rebbe said it many times. I never knew the whole background in the Medrash, but the Rebbe was talking about Shluchim. They go away to a place, and not as a guest, but they become a Teisha there. And that's what it says in Vayesha, that's the ultimate birur. They live in a country, become part of the country, and the Mamshech Alakus in that country. Yeah. I mean, you can go a step further and say, it's not in the Sikha, but I think it's Bepashtus. Who is the Shliach? He's the Shliach of the Nasi Adar, Nasi Akail. So the Shliach goes there, and the Shliach is in this place. That means ganz Klal Yisrael is there.
Yeah, and Lafizem, it's not only that Mashiach is giving the answer, but Mashiach tut es oif. Mashiach is the one who's echad goydel leberbavi. Hat ze gebrengt. Not only is he giving them the answer of why it can be that we were Meshavet B'Kol Umis. Allein tzat es getan, because it was never in history as given Yidden in a Yedem Mokum, in every single place. That's what the Rebbe getan.
Yeah, and so when the Shliach goes there, the Rebbe is doing it. The Rebbe is doing it, and the Rebbe is there. And the Rebbe is Klal Yisrael. So Klal Yisrael is in Italy and in France and South Africa and South America.
Ruve, maybe we do a little update
Yeah.
on your visit. No?
Okay.
Good news or some.
We're in the midst of working on a massive Kabbalah Samalchus campaign for the Yud Aleph Nisan. We want to roll it out. It should be 5 days before Yud Aleph Nisan. It should be 120 hours. 120 hours of some kind of this type of charity campaign. And if we can get together 120 teams of people that are going to be inspiring it, pushing it, the theme of it is going to be Anonos of Malka. It's both a Geshraya of Masai, and it's a declaration that we're not settling for anything other, meaning that we're not happy. We're all building more moistes, we're building mitzvahs, we're doing, but there's a certain acceptance as a ken weiter angehen, chas v'shalom. The Rebbe is accomplishing amazing things through his chassidim. It's nachal's golas. There has to be a huge a unified declaration and a geschrei and a commitment. Alle Chassidim of the ganze Welt, alle schreien zusammen und sagen, whatever, that from, sie kommen jetzt, it's 120 years, Yud Aleph Nisan, and das kann schon weiter nicht angehen. We need his galus taken from the Yad Mamish, and that we are all, as individual Chassidim, every single person is signing their name to that bittul and the acceptance of the Melech, and to be we learn Rosh Hashanah memorim that ma'odah zayin b'Melech the Ratzon Limlich. It was done already then, but now it should be done. Often that all the mashpiyim and cross Lubavitch and Baruch Hashem, we've reached a lot of people that we haven't thought would be possible with sign on something like this. And Baruch Hashem, it's gaining momentum, but it's in the works.
That's better when it says in the Sikha of 2000 Kent that everything was accomplished is Lehev V'Larik until Mashiach comes. Until the ultimate goal is reached. That's very strong words, but that's what it says.
That's what he was saying last week, Rabbi Meislish from Mexico. He was bringing a raya from Haman, from the Umazeh. And I have Jens, and I have Goydel Ashra, Bonov, all in Yanim. He's got all the moisters, he's got all the Yanim, but he says, and then that has to be, and that's what the Rebbe was saying, and that has to be our cry. What's guessed them, That's the whole anonos of Malk. What's this again? We gave him das, we But Soif Kol Soif, das drum Bochrim verherren sich, and man macht Mamorim, man macht Sachen, aber wir chol sein enu Sheveli, because we need the Poil Mamish, the final Indian. I think Lubavitch is ready and the world is ready for that. Durchgegangen, the letzte 2 Jahre. And I think it's beginning to creep in as Azoi kann schon nicht angehen. We wish to help and we should durchbrechen.
Amen.
And no one is going to be upset if the Inyanim happen before you Dalef Nis.
Some plans will have to be canceled, but no.
Yeah. Sandy. Als mich machabit gewesen.
Yeah, it was good gesagt. I have nothing to add. No, but the I think we were just discussing this a little bit ago, and I think as we all are, we were discussing which direction to take the messaging in terms of this effort. So it's an that it's more than just a Bankschaft. It's more than 30 Jahre vorbeigegangen and that other kinds color it's we Rebbe, we've been with you from the start, and we're not accepting anything but the conclusion of this entire effort from the beginning to the end. It's not, to a certain degree, this is more than Mega Zayzagin. I was interested in hearing Majeski's from a mashpia standpoint. This is different than the chasima here is more than the Kabbalah's Hanasias, more than Eksavis Kashas, leading into an Aleph, because this is more than an acceptance of a Nasi. This is an acceptance of a Melech, and there's a different Mesimah with that. It's a different, both from us and from the one that's being miskabel. It's not so much with the Kabbalah Malchus there's an agenda. A Nasi there's an Am, and an Am needs a leader. A Melech has a specific task, and the Am is tasked with being the foot soldiers of the Melech to achieve this particular task. It's different than the Kabbalah's Hanasias. That to a certain degree, when we're signing on this, if we're signing this Kabbalah's Hamalchus, it's with a different commitment than a Kabbalah's Hanasias, than the Ksavis Kashas of Yud Aleph, of Tashin Yud Aleph. So again, I would be interested in hearing whether there is any mucker to such an inyan, but because Chassidim will ask, why is this different than the fact that I every single year on Yud Shvat, of Nissen, I write upon in which I say that. A renewed Ksavis Kashas. Mit was is das anders? And I think the way I understand, to a certain degree, understand it, this is to have ganz Kal Chasid, all of Anash come together to sign this. It's a different shlav in our Kabbalah. it's more than Rebbe. You are our Nasi, or you are our Rebbe. Rebbe, we are committed to seeing this through because we are Mekabel you as that Melech, and therefore nothing short of Mashiach is acceptable.
Mhm.